The prospects of attaining a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip are very slim. The talks so far have failed to achieve the objective, and further recent statements by the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and also his ally, the American President Donald Trump, the hopes for any kind of truce are very quickly fading. Now, indications are as follows. One day after Trump sent his envoy Steve Witkoff to Qatar, the American president said that Hamas has shown no interest in making a peace deal, further stating that the United States and its ally will have to finish the job and bring the remaining hostages back home.
Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad. And it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal.
So what does Donald Trump mean by saying finishing the job? Now, is the question on everyone's mind at this point of time. However, Hamas has pushed back on Trump and Steve Witkoff's claims. The Palestinian faction has expressed its surprise at Trump's statement, citing that progress has been made on the ceasefire agreement. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to echo Trump's sentiment regarding a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. On Friday, Netanyahu said that his government was considering some alternative options to ceasefire talks with Hamas after Israel and the United States recalled their negotiating teams, throwing the future of the negotiations into further uncertainty. A breakthrough on a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas has eluded the Trump administration, as experts have warned that Gaza is in fact on the edge of witnessing its biggest hunger crisis. The pressure to end the war has grown over two folds. Western allies who've supported Israel's operation against Hamas are now calling for an immediate end to this war. Now, France is the latest on the list of Israel's allies who have expressed their support, for Israel can only go so far. Now, French president has taken a bold step to recognize the state of Palestine, and until now, China and Russia were the only permanent members of the United Nations Security Council that recognized Palestinian statehood. Now, France will join them if Macron makes good on his promise in September at the United Nations General Assembly. Although more than 140 countries recognize Palestine as an independent state, France will be the biggest and the most populous and the most powerful amongst the European states to have taken this step. Now, the idea that the Palestinians and the Israelis can live side by side in peace in their own separate states has perhaps never looked more unrealistic. With Gaza in complete shambles and the occupied West Bank facing increasing attacks and illegal settlements by the Israelis. However, the French leader's message is that of hope of a two-state solution which can be mediated via diplomacy. All right, now joining us in the broadcast, we've got Professor Georgia Cafero, who's a professor at the Georgetown University, and he's also the CEO at the Gulf State Analytics. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Cafero, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, I want you to weigh in on that statement that was given by Donald Trump, where he said that he just feels that he has to go in and finish the job. What do you think Donald Trump now means, that Israel needs to go and finish the job, considering what has happened in this war so far?
Yeah, good to be your guest. Thanks for having me on today. I think there's a few ways to look at this. Something Trump has done in the past during negotiations is he puts out these really bold, provocative statements, which is sort of seen as a tactic of putting more pressure on one side to hurry up, make some more concessions immediately in the interest of getting some sort of grand deal across the line. Maybe there's something to say about that. At the same time, I think, given the U.S.'s unconditional support for Israel, and when we also consider the sort of maximalist aims that this ultra-far right-wing government has in Israel, I think many people might reasonably think that Israel was going to go ahead and continue doing this war no matter what. The negotiations in Doha were possibly more of a distraction rather than anything else. And therefore, Trump making a statement like this doesn't really matter.
Right.
Israel was going to go ahead and continue with this war no matter what. And this kind of rhetoric from Trump is sort of more of a sideshow rather than anything that will have a tangible impact on the situation on the ground in Gaza.
I also want you to weigh in on the fact that the French President Emmanuel Macron has said that France will now officially recognize the state of Palestine as an independent sovereign state. But the American President Donald Trump says that it carries no weight. Now, the question, of course, is this. Now, the United States of America, as a matter of policy, has spoken of a two-state solution for the Israelis and the Palestinians. But the United States has always been shy of recognizing an independent state of Palestine. If the United States does not recognize an independent state of Palestine, does it even make sense to talk of a two-state solution?
Well, this is one of the huge contradictions in U.S. foreign policy. On paper, the United States has for decades been supportive of a two-state solution. But when we look at the actual policies of the United States, it's very clear that Washington does not favor a two-state solution. The U.S. has never put pressure on Israel to end the occupation or dismantle apartheid institutions. So the position that the U.S. has on paper does not really mean anything. Now, with respect to the decision that France made to recognize the state of Palestine, that is interesting, and there is symbolic weight there. As you were showing a few minutes ago on the screen, there are some other European countries that have already made that move. But, France being a heavyweight in the European Union, France having a seat on the having a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, it carries a lot more weight having a country like France as opposed to, with all due respect, say Ireland or Norway making that move. But it's very symbolic, though. The French government is not putting any sanctions on Israel. They're not expelling the Israeli ambassador. There's no talk of France cutting off diplomatic relations with Israel. Those would be moves that would carry more weight beyond the symbolism. I would just add, I think it is interesting to consider how France is trying to be a diplomatic bridge between the West and the Arab world. And at a time in which the U.S., Germany, and some other Western states are giving full-scale unconditional support to Israel during this genocide, I think France making this move at this time needs to be understood within that context of Paris playing this bridging role between the West and the Arab Islamic world.
That's an important point that you've made. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Cafero, for joining us with that perspective there.
Good to be with you.